Museums have always been political influencers and have long been associated with preservation of histories, a way to the future, a place where certain cultures are represented and a few aren't, a kind of utopia, a place of nostalgia. Outlook, which believes in shaping and reconfiguring existing discourse, would like to propose a panel on different kinds of museums and storytelling and how those very concepts have changed over the years and what it means for museum as practice and as a repository. Museum Biennale, which is a first ever initiative by the Bihar Museum, is a place for engagement with museums and a platform to understand the context and future of such places that have potential to make people understand and have multiple perspectives on history. There will be a conversation on how these events work, their site specific characters, and how they can make art more accessible.
Thank you so much for coming to this, and we would like to thank all the participants, and I've known them in different capacities. And thank you so much for taking all the trouble to come. And so the first question I would like to ask is, both, so both you curated Kochi and you founded that, and then just wanted to ask that how that forum kind of democratizes art, and also what are the methods that you employ in the curatorial selection and the kind of themes that you've come up over the years, and how those kinds of events can interact with this kind of event, which is just in its second edition. You just completed the fifth edition, so if you can.
Thank you, Outlook. Thank you, Bihar Museum Biennale team. Anjali Kumarji, I met you at the inaugural function at the Bihar Museum, and all of my friends here. The idea of biennial is happened in a way, a destiny, I would say. I believe in destiny, not God-given destiny. It is passion and commitment and inquisitiveness developed destiny. Then Culture and Education Minister of Kerala had visited Mumbai. On our conversation, he said that you are a very successful artist, you are also very successful artist. What's the best thing can be offered to the state of Kerala? So we have suggested, my colleague, we have suggested a Biennale would be the right thing to do. And nobody knew what is a Biennale is, that period of time in Kerala. Even my minister didn't know about that. Biennale is, as we know that, every 2 years it takes place. The first edition of the Biennale was opened in Venice in 1895. Kochi Museum Biennale opened on 12/12/12. And this year it was the fifth edition we had completed. I have learned it from other biennial. I would like to say that, when we started thinking about the Biennale, the main force was our artist community. They've given huge support. Art community, when I talk about it, it's not just about artists, galleries, friends, collectors, enthusiastic or connoisseurs from all around the world. Also the local, we thought about local is that, we experienced from other biennial, one of the Biennale we had visited. And I have said this anecdote many times, but I think it is important to know. This is an opening day, professional preview day. There were hundreds of people waiting at the entrance of the museum, and across the road, across the museum, there were kids who were playing, so I just wanted to check it out, what the local kids think about it. So I went up to ask them what is happening here, doesn't seem like, these people are from here. So none of these kids, unfortunately, no idea about what is happening next door to their land. This is definitely that triggered in our mind, what is important is prepare local area. The ground, you have to prepare it. You need to know the earth of it. You need to know the culture where it is we are going to put up. And fortunately, it was our Biennale is called Kochi Museum Biennale. Muziris was the oldest port. When we think about any kind of creative, or whether it is marketing or trade was an important element. So Muziris was the oldest port, which was vanished in 1341, and this Muziris used to bring more than 50 countries used to visit that place. And when it was vanished, the new port originated, that is Kochi. When I talk about Kochi and Mattancherry is only 4.5 square kilometer area, which consists of 44 different kind of community lives there. That is an incredible place to open up. And that location played an important role. And when we started working on the Biennale, I think local public, how do we educate them? What is a Biennale? People have no clue. So all our young generation of practitioners, we send them out to different schools and colleges to give, not about biennial, we were talking about art. They were giving, they carried projectors around and, given talks in 35 colleges and schools, theater friends given, theater sketches in different villages and things like that. And the bloggers, about 30, 35 bloggers came to. That's the time people realized it. Earlier they thought it is about painting and sketching and drawing and sculpture. That's the exhibition. Why are you spending so much of money? And those kind of controversy was on there. So this bloggers actually changed. 15 days before it opened, we showed where is the site, what are the site. When we were thinking about the Biennale, there was no exhibition space in a way, ever the controlled space, and we have created Little Kala Academy space, converted into a kind of museum quality weather controlled space. And then now we have from 10,000 square feet to 600,000 square feet of exhibition area in dilapidated building and changed spaces. So I don't want to take so much of time because I think there are many people are waiting. But it is important to prepare the local site, laborers. We need to know the people of that space, politics of the land, and of course, it is, everything is coming to that trade space, so already they are familiar about the different communities and cultures. So it's kind of melting pot of all kinds of knowledge and things like that. Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to ask, now come to Neera and Kaiwan, about this site-specific thing that Bose has talked about, like Kerala and, Muziris being the port and multiculturalism and all kinds of things. And again, Bihar Museum is the biennial is in Bihar. So how does this architecture and how does these, these things that are organized in a certain area, how do they influence things and how is that important? Neera, if you can talk about Taiwan, however, the architecture and the museum. Yeah, of the museum and of these events where in the warehouses you have these kinds of things going in, like the local, when Bose is talking about this whole thing of the local culture and also involving people, and you have worked a lot on chawls and inclusivity and gender and all these kinds of perspectives. If you can talk about that and how can that we can take that ahead.
Museum, or for that matter, any other architecture is intrinsically connected with the culture. It is we can say informed by historic processes, and finally it's responsive also to the everyday practices. So these are important, but it is when we talk about museum, we talk about the monumental scale, we talk about the the huge domes which are spanning the large spans. Then there are cluster of columns, huge scale inside the space which is inside, which becomes very intimidating with all the glitter and all the so this inside configuration of space is extremely important for any function, and especially for a museum which over the centuries has been a very hierarchical kind of space, where how many people actually feel like getting into a building which is so dominating, which is like awe-inspiring space. Even inside it, the feeling is the same. You cannot have a dialogue with the whatever things which are displayed. They are all connected with either the dynasties, or the architecture is very colonial or royal, with all kinds of quote unquote styles of architecture, you know, Gothic, Neo-Gothic, classical, Indo-Saracenic, where RCC buildings are there, but you just paste the so-called Indian motifs on them. This entire area is like a museum. In fact, this area of Mumbai, where you can see all these kind of public buildings, which are which actually you only see from outside. You know, there is no. I mean, unfortunately, in architectural education, also I mean, I studied in the 70s, but we still studied the same way the colonial, during the colonial times, how architectural education was to just get the skilled draftsmen, to for the British engineers and architects to create these kind of public buildings which we see all over. And therefore, what is within a building, that configuration of space within that spatiality, and how do you respond to that? How whether it creates what kind of space, whether it is a human scale, egalitarian space where you can have a dialogue. So that is so far, in a way, missing in the various museum spaces which we have been into. It is probably after the independence, and we can there was some we can see some museum which kind of tried to break this social hierarchical system and made the museums more open to public. And I mean, just as an example, I can give Charles Korea's example of JKK, Jawahar Kala Kendra, and Bharat Bhavan. I haven't seen Maki's museum, but I'm sure that will also have this kind of a, spaces conducive to democratic interactions and so on. And so in JKK or in Bharat Bhavan, you do see a different kind of architecture which is more interactive. There are open spaces, semi-open spaces, there are terraces, verandas, and so on, where different activities can take place. And I may want to share that the School of Architecture, where which 8 of us architects have founded, did, and we go beyond architecture and have dialogue with other arts as well. So in JKK, in those open spaces, in the corridors and so on, were my two colleagues, Prasad Shetty and Rupali Gupta, had actually curated an exhibition. About 21 artists and architects participated, and this entire space was beautifully used. Unfortunately, Charles Korea was already passed away. He wasn't there to see it, but it was a very exciting spaces, and we are looking forward to that kind of spaces, especially when biennales are taking place. That's all I think right now.
The way the displays
Gender
happen.
in this respect, okay. I mean, years back, we had done some study of where women, how women respond to these spaces, the public institutions, I mean, including the museums, and what they feel. So it's such an the entire, what we call the entrance portico in colonial times, that itself, the entry point itself is intimidating, and they don't know what museum does for them probably. And these were the women who in their childhood also had not entered the museum. Now we have lots of school children going to the museum and all. But so in that sense, these existing museums just did not work. It's not only the gender, but it is also, you tell me which, if you see across the caste, class, race, genders also, I'm saying, how many would be get the feeling of they are welcomed inside, or they can contribute, or they can gain something. So that way, I mean, beyond that, now I don't want to get into gender further, but obvious.
The mascot, which is the Yakshi, who doesn't have the religion, and she's also a tree spirit. So she's the main, you can see the statue over there. The Yakshi for this gender thing. So Bihar Museum uses Yakshi as the main mascot for the museum, which is quite interesting. And Kaiwan, I wanted to talk to you about also the same thing, but also about, you and I were talking about museums as potential education sites, and how do we go about that, and how these kinds of events that Bihar kind of has now come up with like this, just the second edition. How can that help?
Sure. Firstly, yeah, thanks to Bihar Museum and Outlook for getting us all together and the spirit of this event. So I would approach this discussion from two experiences or two work areas that I've been involved in. One is as somebody who grew up as an architecture student, as a student of aesthetics, and then went on to teach these subjects in a city like Bombay. You're spoiled. Yeah, you have two of the most fantastic museums besides many other small museums in this city, Bhaudaji Lad and CSMVS. You have a range of fantastic art galleries which are doing cutting edge work. You had institutions right from Mohile Parekh Center to UDRI to Gyan Prava to Arbor, which you mentioned. We were spoiled for the choice of having access to what you can see, where you can go for education, which is parallel to university education, and to understand a certain ecology within which all of these things happen. I realized this sense of ecology actually only much later when I traveled to various other cities, some cities which are even better placed than Bombay, some cities that may not equate as well to a city like a metropolitan city like Bombay in India, where I started thinking, if I had to teach in these places, which would be the spaces I will take students to? Because if I had aesthetic students, I would easily take them to the sculpture gallery at CSMVS, or to take my design students to the Bhaudaji Lad Museum was automatic and obvious for me. So in a sense, it was then that I realized the necessity to imagine and understand these spaces, besides their problems like Neera was listing out, but the possibility of turning these places around for not simply an arts, aesthetics, and architecture education, but an education what it means to be a citizen of a city or a country. And I think, in many ways, being a student of reading Tapadi Guha Thakutar or Kavita Singh, these are not new names for these audiences here, but I think their work has been pioneering in sort of making us look at museums and museum spaces, and to incorporate some of that learning as a scholar into the way you turn it into pedagogy. So for example, now it's in a very much more structured way, obviously leaving flexibility always year after year to sort of constantly do teaching exercises within the museum spaces. I was telling you that, I have a course that actually did a 21-day tour of 4 cities in Europe that looked at postmodern architecture of the museum buildings, the way the content is organized, to understand the 20th and colonial history through Europe, in a sense. So one can actually turn around a lot of questions, including the questions of what you see today on Instagram. You take again the sculpture gallery or the miniature gallery at the CSMVS, or the way the figurines gallery in first floor of Bhaudaji Lad Museum. Various conversations on community, various conversations on what you see, what you don't see, how do you understand erotica, how do you understand gods and goddesses. All these questions can be addressed, and then the museum is a much more active space than simply a repository. And I think the new museums, whether it's Jawahar Kala Kendra and what I know of Bihar Museum, are these museums that turn around these questions much more in their design format further. The other experience has been obviously as somebody who worked in a particular quarter of the city, which was the native town in colonial Bombay, much before these places became sort of exotic and popular for tourists and heritage walkers, where very often when I worked on Buleshwar, I always had to clarify that it's not nostalgia and it's not loss that brings me to this area, but it's the possibility of looking at this place again and again and learning something from it that brings me to it. So in that sense, Alice in Buleshwar, today its photographs are archival because many things have changed in that book. But it literally, in that sense, the book becomes a museum, because every time you read that book and you can walk in that area, the place will become alive in a different way. And in that sense, the idea that city and architecture are evolving spaces of education, and education through viewing, the sense of what you see. And today that's absolutely so important, because we are in the midst of probably a strongest period in history where visuality takes over. So in a period where visuality takes over, to go to time periods, architecture, objects where visuality played a much more slower role. I think these contrasts and these interactions are very important. And whether it's a grown-up citizen or whether it's a student, I've seen them sort of unfold in very many different ways.
Thank you so much. And coming from there, my next question is to Anjani ji. A lot of people have looked at the Bihar Museum and, the cost and everything else. And, you got in the Japanese architects to build this huge museum. It's like a meditative space, and you've got, auditoriums, you've got all kinds of infrastructure inside it. But a lot of people also said, why does Bihar need a museum like this? I mean, it's a poor state. You need to focus on, education, health, all kinds of things. We have been a Bimaru state, Garib state, whatever. And to give the people this kind of museum, which also kind of stands out, in the whole architecture situation of Bihar. So I just wanted to ask, why did you guys decide to do this, and why now the Museum Biennale?
No, you are very right. When this idea of making Bihar Museum came, so that was the general question. And another was when I used to make a presentation of this concept in foreign countries, so they will ask, where is Patna? So I had to tell them that it is between Delhi and Kolkata. They were knowing Patliputra, that was good, but they were not knowing Patna and Bihar. So my answer was that we have been the seat of power, we have that culture heritage, and somebody has to showcase it. And my government and my chief minister has that vision. And we thought that because Bihar has become soft power state. We don't have the minerals, big industries and other things. So our growth has to be tourism, education, culture, agriculture related things. So that, in that center, this art, culture, heritage museum has an important place. So, but there were some intellectuals, every place have intellectuals. So they started, writing in papers, and few people went to the High Court also. And they said it's a waste of, it's a misuse. You should spend on road and schools, etc. I said we are doing it. Otherwise we are doing it, but it is the government who will decide what has to be done for their future generation. And we contested that case. Unfortunately, the final order by the Chief Justice was, it's a waste of public money. So I had to take a stand that the government will decide. You please pass an order. Who has to implement that order? Government has to implement that order. And I am the Chief Secretary of a state and I refuse to implement that order. What happens? If they pass such illogical order, how can they go against their public mandate? So please pass an order. So ultimately he could not pass very clear order stopping it. But he wrote, it's a waste of public money. A government wants to waste public money. Then what do you do? So, but I'll go on that architecture thing. That was very interesting. So when we were searching for a very good architect, and Rahul is here. So from Opolis. So that time, for the first time, 26 international architects, all top ones, participated, because the idea we are advocating was like the big ones who knows you in half of the world, because the South Asia, East Asia, Maki has never done in this area. I said, but nobody knows you. You may be a great architect or Norman Foster. So ultimately that worked, and 26 people participated. We shortlisted 5. And when they made presentation, so one, I will not take the name, was supposed to be the best technically. He created a black box of 10 stories, with all that high technology, beautiful roof. And, then he says that what I am doing is 50 years ahead, 100 years ahead. So there will be nothing like this in India. But I said that I will have to give a helicopter ride to see your architecture. I cannot charge more. So we went to Maki's design because the whole thing is ground plus 1. I did not wanted a dominating building. Second, I wanted a structure which merges with my cityscape. I don't have a skyscrapers. And where people feel welcome. So the whole space, whole museum is ground plus 1. Only my administrative section is ground plus 3. So that was very welcoming museum, and lot of spaces where people feel really relaxed, children enjoy, and everybody who comes is very comfortable. So Maki, that way, and it gives you some hint of Nalanda ruins. So it's little familiarity with that, because some part of cladding is bricks and bricks. So that was very clear in our mind that it has to be a welcoming space. It has to be, people where they can enjoy. There is, in my museum, there is nothing like don't. In fact, in my museum, we say, please touch, please feel, please experience. So those are the mental blocks that we removed. But we selected those type of material which will not normally be damaged. Because the museum is for, and Bihar has a very youthful population, and we wanted our children to participate, so we selected those type of materials, and they did a great job. And that children's section, which is a very important section, is really, and many countries are coming to see that because they want to replicate that. Because everywhere in museums, don't. Here it is, please, please, please. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to come to Subodhji for the next question. So Subodhji, I mean, the Bihar Museum also has a folk art and diaspora museum along with a contemporary section. And you have built this huge, mandala kind of artwork over there. And you've used these everyday objects, which you've always used in your work. And a lot of it comes from Bihar. And in this, we were trying to explore what is a museum, basically. The body itself is a museum. I mean, any site of memory could be a museum. So I just wanted to ask you about your work and how it fits. I mean, if you can speak a little bit about your mandala, and through that, if you can talk about your body as a museum and the everyday objects and the functionality of objects when you place them in a museum and how that changes. And of course, Bihar in it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chinky. Thank you, Anjali. Thank you, Outlook. Thank you, friends. I'm going to talk about, as an artist, what is the Biennale and what is the Museum Biennale. As an artist, myself, I participated so far various Biennale. To Kanju Biennale, Busan Biennale, Moscow Biennale, Havana Biennale, Kochi Biennale, Venice Biennale, many Biennale I participated, so I have a quite understanding of the Biennale. The huge difference between the Museum Biennale and the normal Biennale, like in the world, the two most famous Biennale is Venice Biennale and Whitney Museum Biennale. So Whitney Museum Biennale happened within the museum, all the art activities, and the Venice Biennale happened all over the city. So this is the big differences between the Museum Biennale and the Biennale in normal, like Busan Biennale, Kangju Biennale, many other Biennale. And Kochi Biennale is one of the, where the taking the many various places within the city to Biennale happen. So Anjani ji has a huge task to do the Museum Biennale, and he has to give all the space to the artist to exhibit the artwork. As an artist, I tell you, when I go and participate in the Biennale, one thing I look at for the space. What the space, personally, I got it. Where I am going to exhibit the artwork. Artwork I am exhibiting, does is going to fit the atmosphere or not? Does the museum curator given me this space or not? And if not, then I go behind the curator and almost I fight for it. Please give me the space, what I conceptualize the idea, I wanted to exhibit it. I wanted to show it. I wanted to express it. So these are the huge tasks between the museum, the Biennale curator and the artist. It's very important to have a exhibition designer who can understand the artist and take over the idea of the artist and give them a space to work within that atmosphere. And good thing with the Bihar Museum Biennale, this is the very proud moment for us. This is the first time happening. As a Bihari, I was also part of the jury, one of the two select the architect. And when this museum taken place, and when you see this complex, it's really mind-blowing, surprise you, And I'm sure the artists who participating in this Biennale, they will very, very proud to be part of this museum, because often the museum is our historical museum, the old artifact, history of Bihar. And when you put in contemporary art within that, the really is also challenge for the contemporary artist or any artist to be part of it, be part together. How I'm going to have a dialogue between this old artwork and my work, and tell you that challenge sometimes works so well because they're having a dialogue almost between them within the two artworks. And it's a really proud moment. And I will say about the yantra. Yantra is one of my work. I'm very, very thanks to Anjani ji. Anjani ji singer. Why we talk Anjani ji? I tell you why we talk Anjani ji. Anjani ji is a single-handed man in Bihar who able to create this kind of music. Of course, the government was there supporting him. Of course, Nitish ji was there to have an idea too. But who's going to make it? Who's going to make this happen? Who's going to put the artwork the way it is right now? It's all single-handed. Anjani ji did it. So we are very, very proud to Anjani ji, what he done today to our museum in Bihar. And Yantra, he's also invited me to make one artwork within the museum. And Maki, he was not, according to Anjani ji, he was not ready to put artwork in the outdoor, but Anjani ji makes sure that something happen. And I'm very proud to be part of the museum within my artwork. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next question is to you, of course, Mr. Natraj. I just wanted to ask, about museums. The COVID times presented a lot of challenges in terms of viewing and in terms of experiencing. And museums obviously are places of experience, dialogue, all kinds of things. And a lot of things have changed. And also the role of museums have changed, right, from just historical museums to incorporating all kinds of things, and their political spaces as well. There's this whole politics of representation, selection, inclusivity, what gets excluded, whose histories are told, and what histories are deleted. And I mean, coming to our current political situation with the post-truth kind of phenomenon operating, I just wanted to ask you in terms of museums, and you've been there in the sector for a while, how can museums become more inclusive and can evolve and can kind of become these centers where people can go and, engage and kind of learn and also resist the other kinds of reductive narratives that are taking place?
I'm very happy being with you this evening. I thank all of you. The question you have asked, it is very much... Hello. Question you have asked, it is very important at this time. You know that the idea of museum is gradually changing nowadays. And museums are no more a repository of artifacts and objects. It has become the place of interpretation of time and space. We in museums connect ourselves with the things happened in the past and happening now and what is going to happen in future. So museum as a special public place has a lot of responsibility, and museum professionals have a lot of role to play in it, how we are making our society responsible for whatever happening all around us. So we need to have more participation in museum as a whole. We know that in India, we do not have that kind of museum culture. We are getting very little viewers or visitors to come in our museums. It is mostly urban centric and city specific. We get some cross section of people who have access to many things, but we don't get people who do not have access of many things. So our intention is to have more people who are not having access. We must make our museum friendly to those people. When we talk about accessibility, it is not only for having access for visitation. It is in terms of financial accessibility. It is in terms of intellectual accessibility. Museums have role to make people understand, make people have a feel of who am I? What is my role in this society? Why I am in this world? What I am supposed to do for others? So giving a sense of belongingness to the society. So that is the role of museum. So to do that, we need to take different mode of avenues to that. At this present situation, we know we have, as you were mentioning about pandemic situation, it has changed a lot of our ideas, perceptions, the activities of museums, the inclusivity, the accessibility, so many things. Probably the understanding of museum and reaching out to the people through museum unprecedentedly changed the concept. And now we realize that technology evolution has brought us to such a change that we are looking for some kind of technological intervention so that I reach out to many people. So the new media, the new digital technology has come in for help to us. So we are looking for some of the things which really will help us reaching out to many people. I understand that many of the museum professionals and many school of thoughts has certain ideas about physicality of museums and virtuality of museums. I am very much in favor of having multisensory inputs for understanding anything all around us. I'm sure that digital experiences, the virtual realities, and so many things will not give that kind of multisensory inputs to have with us. We know how learning takes place from childhood as we grow up, and even at the age of mind and beyond that, we always learning things. But at the childhood, when we are in the beginning of life, we learn many things through different kinds of inputs from environment and nature and assimilation of those things. So most of the things everybody knows that we learn through experience, the kind of kinesthetic learning and so many things takes place. So physicality of museum is very essential. When we enter in certain museums, be it any museum, so if you really think, we feel that museum, we smell that museum, we smell others being there, we try to understand each other, we have conversations in museums, and we need to promote more intensely that kind of interactions in museums.
And that brings me to Amrit Gangar, and basically talks about the physicality of museums. And you have been doing these Facebook museums, like virtual museums. And obviously there are many different kinds of museums that have come up in the world. Like there's one called the Museum of Broken Relationships in Croatia, and all kinds of different, like for instance, Orhan Pamuk's Museum of Innocence, which is based on his book, is fiction. So all kinds of museums have come up, and I wanted to talk to you about, especially two things. During COVID, you had the migrant laborers, and you took it upon your, you had this virtual forum, and unfortunately, people are always hanging out on Facebook and not really going to museums, the physical museums. So you used that to kind of talk about migration, and you did a book as well, and then you also run a virtual museum. And why is that? And is that now a part of this evolution of museums? And is that the way to go? And how do you kind of do this between virtual and physical? And how do you kind of, in the new world, of course?
मैं कुछ कहानी बताऊंगा आपको। 2020 BC समय को अंजनी जी मैं इस तरह से अभी विभाजित करता हूँ, BC और AD नहीं, लेकिन BC और AC। BC is before Corona, before COVID, and AC is after COVID. This is a great marker of our time, the COVID time. Two years, I think we were alienated, and when we meet physically, it's completely different experience in mind and heart and body. So मैं कहानी ये बताऊंगा कि 2020 BC में I was traveling from Patna to Chhapra. छपरा एक बहुत हिस्टोरिक टाउन है बिहार में, जहाँ भिखारी ठाकुर थे, पास में एक गांव में पैदा हुए थे। बाबू राजेंद्र प्रसाद, जयप्रकाश नारायण, सारण इंटरनेशनल फेस्टिवल होता है बिहार में, तो वहाँ मैं ज्यूरी पे था 2 टाइम। तो मैं जब पटना से बिहार जाता था कुछ 3-4 घंटे का बाय रोड, तो गाड़ीवान था जो जीप का ड्राइवर था, वो गीत गाता था, कुछ गाना गाता था, मगधी में था मेरे ख्याल से। हाँ, तो वो गाने से कुछ मुझे सेंस आती थी। तो बिहार ने मुझे प्रोवोक किया। हर म्यूजियम का एक कर्म होता है, आपके विजिटर जो होते हैं उनकी इमेजिनेशन को प्रोवोक करना, उनको रंजित करना। वो स्पेस का एक गुण होता है, स्पेस जो है वो उसमें जान होती है, जीवंत होती है वो। तो ये गीत सुन के मुझे बिहार ने एक आइडिया दिया। वो गीत था पवन के बारे में। पवन के नाम देता है ये देश, बिहार, पुरबैया। ये पवन का नाम तो मुझे याद ये लगा कि व्हाई नॉट म्यूजियम ऑफ विंड्स। ये पवन का म्यूजियम होगा, जैसे पुरबैया है और दूसरे पवन के नाम है, तो ये कैसे होगा। तो ये जब अंजनी जी ने जादूगर बोला, तब मुझे लाहौर म्यूजियम, जिसको अजायब घर बोलते हैं, जिसका उर्दू, आई थिंक दिस अजायब इज नॉट जस्ट जादू बट इज सेंस ऑफ वंडर। व्हेन यू एंटर दिस स्पेस म्यूजियम, it should provide you with sense of wonder. So all these were my fundas, when I started of imagining from my museum of memories on Facebook. It's very popular now globally. From my museum of memories, मेरे खुद की memories होती थी दिमाग की। 8 साल पहले, अभी मैं 11 साल पहले मैं पेरिस गया था, तो अभी का मेरा जो पोस्ट है फेसबुक आपको रिट्रीव करती है। फेसबुक का एक गुण है कि 11 साल पहले आप कुछ डालते हैं फेसबुक पे तो वापस आता है वो। आपने ये मेमोरी था आपका, तो ये मेमोरी मेरी वापस आई। वो कैथीड्रल है पेरिस का, उसके जो बाहर जो कल्चर्स है, उसके मिथोलॉजी है, उसके बारे में। तो पूरी दुनिया के लोग ज्वाइन होते हैं उसमें। इट्स नॉट जस्ट वर्चुअल, इट्स ऑल्सो फिजिकल। इसमें इस congregation, I call it congregation, is a global congregation happening here in this my museum of memories, from my museum of memories on Facebook. That's my column. और इसमें जब कोरोना चल रहा था, तो मैंने तब जो आती थी इमेजेस, मीडिया में आती थी, जो टेलीविज़न पे आती थी, काफ़ी सारे दर्द भरी कहानी, और ज़्यादातर लोग झारखंड और बिहार के थे, जो मिलो दूर चलते जाते थे। पता नहीं हमको कितने लोग मरे। Nobody has given, state has not given us the figure. This is the great question of our time. What are we? We think it is transparent time. It's not. It's opaque. It's most opaque time we are living in. So what is the function of museum? Museum function is to make it transparent. आपको इतिहास के बारे में आपको जो पर्दा है वो खोल देते हैं। जैसे मैंने यहाँ नेशनल म्यूजियम ऑफ इंडियन सिनेमा, वो मैंने क्यूरेट किया था नैरेटिव, ये थोड़े दूर है यहाँ से, पेडर रोड पे। तो उसमें मैंने पहला सवाल था एटिमोलॉजी। अब चित्रपट शब्द हम यूज़ करते हैं ना, चित्रपट कहाँ से आया, ये शब्द आया कहाँ से? तो सवाल तो मेरे दिमाग में यही आया, ये शब्द आया कुछ तो उसका सोर्स होगा ना, मूल। ये आया पटचित्र से। उसको फ्लिक कर दीजिए, पटचित्र का चित्रपट होता है। वो पटुआ होते हैं, पटुआ जो बिहार में भी है, पटुआ उड़ीसा में है, बंगाल में है, आंध्र में है। वो पटुआ ये जो स्क्रॉल बनाते हैं, पट और फिराते हैं और गाना गाते हैं, दिस इज नथिंग बट सिनेमा। तो ये भारतीय कुछ में मुझे एक आइडेंटिटी देनी थी। जैसे आप गुलशन महल जो 2 फेसेस में थोड़े दूर है यहाँ से, तो जैसे आप प्रवेश करते हैं तो पहले आपको ये दिखाएगा पटुआ गीत गा रहा है, तो ये मेरा डेफिनेशन है सिनेमा, इट्स अ जेनेरिक वे ऑफ सिनेमा। मेरी और आर्ग्यूमेंट है, सिनेमा वॉज बॉर्न, मोशन पिक्चर वॉज बॉर्न 40,000 ईयर्स अगो। 1895 में तो वो मशीन आया, लेकिन जो विचार है दिमाग में वो तो 40,000 साल। अल्टामिरा केव में जो पहला चित्र बनाया था होमोसेपियन ने, मानव ने, वो क्या था? रनिंग एनिमल, बाइसॉन। दैट इज द मोशन ऑफ गति, the motion. The notionally or generically it's a motion picture. First motion picture was born in the cave. This city has, right in the center of the city there are caves, canary caves or Buddhist caves. उसमें भी बिहारी है, बिहार को विहार करके आए होंगे बुद्धिस्ट मंक्स, और उसमें जो स्तूपा है अंदर, जो मेन हॉल है उधर, तो काफ़ी सारे वहाँ जाते हैं तो आपका ये दिमाग खुलने लगता है। एक 70 mm का पर्दा हो जाता है, जो 8 mm का पर्दा होता है ना। तो ये यूथ को, हमारे जो युवान लोग हैं, उनको बस यही करना है हमारा काम, उसको प्रवोक करना है कि ये पर्दा खोल दो आपका। आज सामने जहांगीर आर्ट गैलरी में एक एग्जीबिशन चल रहा है, उसका टाइटल है मिलेनियंस। सब 20 years 30 years old young artists are showing their work. It's very interesting the way I went there a while ago, और देखा तो मैंने ये 20 साल की लड़कियां और लड़के जो बनाया है, एंड मोस्ट ऑफ इज वेरी मटेरियल, बेसिक मटेरियल, वुड का बनाया हुआ है, शिल्प बहुत मिनिमलिस्टिक। ये मिलेनियंस है, दे वी आर ऑल सराउंडेड बाय आर्टिफिशियल एजेंसी, जीनोम सीक्वेंसेस आ गया, क्या क्या नहीं आया, साइंस ने सब कुछ ऐसा चकाचौंध कर दिया हम सबको। कुछ दिशा नहीं सूझती है हमको, दिशा नहीं दिखती है, कहाँ है कुछ। ऐसे समय में ये मिलेनियंस जो है, ये सामने बिल्कुल जहांगीर आर्ट गैलरी में ये जो एग्जीबिशन देखा, दे आर प्लेइंग विद द मटेरियल, हार्ड कोर मटेरियल, इट्स नॉट वर्चुअल। तो ये थोड़ा सा बहुत और क्यूरेटर ने जिस तरह से लिखा है, इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग। द यंग माइंड्स आर एंगेजिंग विथ मैनी थिंग्स इंक्लूडिंग म्यूजियोलॉजी। म्यूजियोलॉजी हमारे लिए ऐसे नया है, कुछ वेस्ट से आया हुआ है, लेकिन मुझे बहुत मज़ा आ गया कि भिखारी ठाकुर के मुंह में म्यूजियम के बारे में गीत जो था, बिहार म्यूजियम हमारा ऐसा, और ये भिखारी ठाकुर बोलते हैं म्यूजियम, तो अजीब सा लगता है कि म्यूजियम का हमारे लिए शब्द भी नहीं है। इमेजिन सच रिच लैंग्वेज इज व्हाट वी कॉल म्यूजियम इन आवर लैंग्वेज। हैव यू एनी आइडिया? नो? अजायब घर तो बोलते हैं, अजायब घर जो है लाहौर का, हाँ, तो अजायब घर तो अजायबी जो है, उसमें जो सिनेमा का म्यूजियम तो उसमें होती। मेरा जो कंसल्टेंट था वो मोची था, फिल्म्स डिवीजन के गेट के बाहर जो कॉबलर बैठता है ना, ही नोज मैनी मोर सॉन्ग देन आई डू, एंड ही विल एडवाइज मी, सर ये फिल्म का गाना है। तो ये जो पॉपुलर मीडियम है, और ये जो सब साथ में लेने का, जो जिसमें जेंडर भी नहीं हो, सब एक क्लास आता है। तब गरीब जो है, आई ऑलवेज आर्ग्यू, ये फिल्म इंडस्ट्री चलाने वाले लोग गरीब लोग हैं देश के, जो टिकट लेके जाते हैं सिनेमा में। आवर एलिट क्लास, द इंटेलेक्चुअल क्लास ऑलवेज हैड डिस्टेंस फ्रॉम पॉपुलर सिनेमा। ये यार, ये 75 की बात करूँ, मैंने रखा है इसमें। 1975 में शोले बनी, इमरजेंसी भी आई, दीवार भी बनी, और जय संतोषी माता भी बनी। 4 लाख रुपए में बनी थी ये फिल्म, और शोले के बरोबर उसने बहुत मुनाफा कमाया। और ये शहर में, ये सो कॉल मॉडर्न सिटी में मैंने देखा है, जब फिल्म चल रही थी कैवान, तब आरती उतारते थे लोग पर्दे के सामने। अनीता गुहा आती थी, जय संतोषी माँ, आरती लेके जाते थे, अगरबत्तियाँ वगैरह सब वैसे गाने और आरती भजन गाते थे। और मैनेजर इतना घबरा जाता था, मैं कच्छ का हूँ, मांडवी पोर्ट में एक थिएटर में मैनेजर घबराया तो आग लग जाएगी, तो स्क्रीनिंग बंद कर दिया उसने, क्योंकि वो तो दिया जलाते हैं सब। ये यहाँ पे हुआ, तब से हमारे बुद्धि वर्ग जो है, शुक्रवार को चने खाने लगा। ये बहुत दिलचस्प बात है, ये कोई इतिहास के बाहर की बात नहीं है भाई, ये म्यूजियम में आना चाहिए। मैं मानता हूँ कि ये इंटेलेक्चुअल जो ये बर्डन लेके फिरते हैं ना, हम बड़े बड़े शब्द यूज करते हैं जो गरीब लोग समझ नहीं सकते हैं, कुछ रिलेट नहीं कर सकते हैं। जाओ भैया, 4 घंटा में पटना से छपरा गया तो सब म्यूजियम ही म्यूजियम था, सब पूरा जो रास्ता था सब इर्द गिर्द सब म्यूजियम था। एंड इट्स नॉट कॉलोनियल, इट्स आवर ओन। उसमें मगधी भी है, मैथिली भी है, भोजपुरी भी है, इतनी सारी भाषाएं हैं, इतने सारे वर्ड, लेकिन अब भी म्यूजियम के लिए हमारे लिए शब्द नहीं है। तो आउटलुक को मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि हम एक शब्द ढूंढे म्यूजियम के लिए। बहुत बहुत आभारी हूँ आपका। बहुत सारी कहानियाँ हैं कि छपरा है वो सारण जिले में आता है, सारण इंटरनेशनल फिल्म फेस्टिवल। मैं जिस गांव से आया हूँ उसका नाम है छसरा, बहुत रिलेट करता हूँ। छसरा इटसेल्फ इज म्यूजियम। छ इज 6, सरा इज जो हम मेमोरियल स्टोन्स बोलते हैं ना, तो उसमें 5 भाई और एक बहन की कहानी अभी भी है, वो अभी भी अस्तित्व में है 500 साल के बाद। तो ये छसरा और छपरा के बीच मेरा संबंध बन गया इमीडिएटली। और फिर ड्राइवर मगधी में गीत गाने लगा, पुरबैया का और क्या क्या। ये जो मिलन गाना है सुनील दत्त और नूतन के, उसमें गाना बिहारी है, पवन करे शोर। तो ये जो एक विंड का म्यूजियम बनाते हैं बस। अंजनी जी
Thank you so much for talking about all of this, and it means a lot to us that you guys all came. The one thing I wanted to say as a Bihari is, जो अंजनी जी से बात होने के समय कहा था, बहुत सालों तक बिहारियों ने अपना प्राइड खो दिया था। We were the seat of Nalanda and everything, and जब हम लोग बड़ा हो रहे थे तो we came to Delhi and Bombay and all kinds of places, and somehow we were, a lot of us actually were not used to saying कि हम लोग बिहार से हैं, क्योंकि हम बोलते थे तो लोग बोलते थे कितने लोग हो, और बहुत कुछ मजाक करते थे, हमेशा माइग्रेंट बोलते थे। यहाँ बॉम्बे में भी आपके वो भैया भगाओ आंदोलन वगैरह भी चला था, जो मराठी मानुस वाला। खैर, लेकिन म्यूजियम के आने के बाद आई थिंक देयर इज दिस वेव ऑफ दिस प्राइड, एंड आई थिंक वी आर वेरी थैंकफुल to this museum that has given us that little window to feel ourselves again. And I think identity is a very important thing. And जब हम लोग, कावेरी मेरी स्कूल की दोस्त है, कावेरी से जब हम बात कर रहे थे तो हम लोग बोले कि हम लोग 3 चीज़ देखेंगे बिहार में, सोशलिज्म है, सेक्युलरिज्म है, और वीमेन एम्पावरमेंट है। जो वीमेन एंड डेटीज़ करके एक एग्जीबिशन भी हुआ था बिहार में, विथ ऑल द डेटीज़ एंड वीमेन, एंड दीज वर कॉमन वीमेन इन बिहार, एंड वेरी वेरी पावरफुल बॉडी लैंग्वेज। और जो चौथा था वो विदेशिया था, जो माइग्रेशन है, और बिहार म्यूजियम में विदेशिया का गाना है और डायस्पोरा म्यूजियम है। तो जो चीज़ हम हैं उसको आई थिंक अपना लेने में काफ़ी अच्छा होता है, और हम बात करने से कोई ख़राबी नहीं है, वो हमारे बोलने का तरीका है। एंड कावेरी जब स्पीच लिख रही थी तो उसमें एक लाइन था कि मुंबई और सपनों का शहर, ऐसे अब नहीं रहा, अब बिहार भी वो जगह है जहाँ हम सपना देख सकते हैं। सो थैंक यू सो मच, एंड विल ओपन इट अप टू क्वेश्चंस। अगर किसी को सवाल है तो पूछिए, पैनलिस्ट भी एक दूसरे से सवाल पूछ सकते हैं अगर चाहे तो।
अंजनी जी का जब सोचता हूँ सर तो पवन की बात की, तो अंजनी तो पता है आपको, पवन पुत्र। तो ये
मेरा घर का नाम पवन ही है।
वाह वाह वाह,
जो बचपन में स्कूल का लोग
आपके नाम पे म्यूजियम, पवन का म्यूजियम।
अंजनी साहब को एक मेरा प्रश्न है, आप ये बिहार म्यूजियम का जो इनिशिएटिव है, इसको सारा देश भर में आप इसको कैसे ले जाएंगे, सभी म्यूजियम आपसे सीखे?
देखिए, एक तो ये होने लगा है, ये बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है। जब बिहार म्यूजियम बना तो दैट टाइम यू डिडंट हैव टेम्पलेट्स। Like if you wanted to select a renowned architect by international competition and international jury, it was never done. So we had to develop that template. उसी तरह वेंडर का प्रॉब्लम था, फैब्रिकेटर का प्रॉब्लम था, मटेरियल का प्रॉब्लम था। क्योंकि हुआ क्या था कि लास्ट 50 इयर्स में ऐसा कुछ हुआ नहीं। और दूसरा क्या प्रॉब्लम था, म्यूजियम तो फिर आपको चाहिए क्यूरेटर्स, म्यूजियम प्रोफेशनल्स, बिकॉज जॉब्स वेर नॉट अवेलेबल इन म्यूजियम मार्केट। तो किसी इंस्टीट्यूशन ने उसको बहुत बढ़ाया भी नहीं। तो ये these were the initial questions जो हम लोगों को फेस करना पड़ा. But somehow we developed a template कि भाई इंटरनेशनल जूरी क्या होता है, where government has no power to vote. In fact, in my selection, though it was headed by chief secretary, but he didn't have power to vote. Subodh had power to vote. So no, all those museum directors. तो इस तरह का जब ट्रांसपेरेंट सिस्टम आता है, then you get international participation. Otherwise उनके दिमाग में रहता है सीएम बदल देगा या वो कर देगा, क्या हो जाएगा. तो वो जो टेम्पलेट डेवलप हुआ, तो अभी क्या हो रहा है कि दूसरा फायदा क्या हुआ, बिकॉज इट केम इन स्टेट लाइक बिहार, तो जो कल्चरली अपने को ज्यादा आगे मानते थे लोग, बंगाल है, केरला, ऐसे जो आगे था, महाराष्ट्र या जो भी है, उन लोगों को लगा कि अरे बिहार में बन गया. सो देयर वाज ए प्रेशर फ्रॉम आर्टिस्ट एंड आर्ट फ्रेटर्निटी ऑन देयर गवर्नमेंट. तो वहाँ का सब चीफ सेक्रेटरी आने लगा, डेवलपमेंट कमिश्नर आने लगा. हालांकि बनाया बहुत कम ने, काम भी शुरू किया, लेकिन दो टीम से स्टार्टेड कमिंग. फिर तीसरा, जितना न्यू म्यूजियम्स अभी इंडिया में बन रहा है, वो आके हमारे पास देखता है और हम लोग बहुत आराम से शेयर करते हैं ऑल आवर डॉक्यूमेंट्स, बिकॉज व्हाट इज, अब तो ऑलरेडी एक बार हो चुका है, सो दैट विल गिव यू सम रेफरेंस हाउ इट कैन बी डन. बिकॉज दैट वेंडर्स वे रियल प्रॉब्लम, मटेरियल्स वे रियल प्रॉब्लम. हम लोगों को कुछ मालूम नहीं था कि वो चीज इंटरनेशनल लेवल का कैसे हो सकता है, बट बिकॉज वी वेंट थ्रू दैट होल प्रोसेस विद सपोर्ट ऑफ एवरीबॉडी, तो अब एक टेम्पलेट है. हम लोग नहीं बोल रहे हैं कि ये बहुत बड़ा और बहुत ये है, इससे अच्छा म्यूजियम बनना चाहिए. हम लोग का जो कैपेसिटी था, और बिहार में लैंड इज ए वेरी स्कार्स कमोडिटी, लेकिन देखो गवर्नमेंट का विल इसी से पता चलता है कि इन द सेंटर ऑफ पटना वी हैड 5 मिनिस्टर्स बंगलो एंड 1 यूनिवर्सिटी बिल्डिंग that was demolished for making this museum. So that gave a message what importance we are giving to the museum. तो ये सब बनने से अब ये बात थोड़ा और स्टेट्स को फायदा होने लगा है. इवन नेबरिंग कंट्रीज, वी आर गेटिंग पीपल फ्रॉम नेपाल, बांग्लादेश, और यहाँ पे इससे लोग आना शुरू किए हैं. एंड वी आर शेयरिंग वट एवर जो हम लोगों के पास नॉलेज है. ये सब ट्रायल एंड एरर, कुछ ऐसा नहीं. आई हैव नो आर्ट बैकग्राउंड, आई वाज सिंपली, लेकिन लोगों ने सपोर्ट किया. जैसे कुछ पूछना था तो इनके पास ये आ गए, उन्होंने आइडिया दिया. हम लोग वी आर गुड लिसनर, हम लोगों ने पूरे सुना लोगों को कि भाई कैसे हो सकता है. और हम लोग गवर्नमेंट में एक प्रॉब्लम मेरे साथ क्या था, आई एम बेसिकली इम्प्लीमेंटेशन पर्सन. मैं बहुत बड़े बड़े आइडिया पे नहीं जाता हूँ. अगर वो इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं हो सकता और बिहार को फायदा नहीं हो, इंडिया को फायदा नहीं, तो दैट आइडिया कैन बी अ ग्रेट आइडिया इन न्यूयॉर्क और वाशिंगटन वेयर. लेकिन हमको तो यहाँ क्या चलेगा वो मालूम होना चाहिए, कैसे होगा. गवर्नमेंट में एक और भी प्रॉब्लम होता है गवर्नमेंट म्यूजियम्स में, कि यू हैव टू conclude that project and show it. ये नहीं है कि ये हो रहा है, because that government change after every 5 years, so I had to deliver in 5 years to prove credibility. ये सब कुछ constraints था, but we had answers, we got answers.
Both had a question.
Yes sir. He was one of our great supporters. Everybody supported for me.
I do remember you were coming to see, I think, Sudarshan Shetty's Biennale.
He is here only.
And it's very important that, it was also surprising that, like a lot of bureaucrats coming from different parts of India to see Kochi Musri's Biennale. But how do you make it sustainable is important, like a Biennale is actually a temporary, contemporary museum. For us, Kochi Musri's Biennale is a temporary museum. It's like, Mumbai for me is like a university, that Mumbai city itself is a university for me. How do you make it sustainable? People always ask, I do remember that you spent almost like 517 crore or something to build Mackey designed museum. It's a fantastic museum, but I was also wondering, I was talking to CSM VSS director. He said, you need to have 600 people to work in this museum. Have you found the 600 people?
No, it's a very good question. That is sustainability. What happens, unfortunately, sector of culture is not priority of either central government nor state government. So what we are spending is 0.5% of, not even 1% of the budget on these things. So that is everywhere, in India at least. In foreign countries, you have 2% for every project you have to spend on all these things. Somehow, India, it is not. So that is a big question. So, but what we started with, when I was making my entry fee as 100 rupees, so my cabinet and everybody started asking, 100 rupees kaun dega? And you are creating a barrier. मैंने कहा कि our point, अच्छा, then they quoted National Museum and all those museums where it is still 20 rupees salar jung. हम बोले कि देखो अच्छा खाना देंगे तो पैसा लेंगे और हम फ्री में कुछ भी आई डोंट बिलीव इन इफ यू आर गिविंग क्वालिटी एंड यू विल बी सरप्राइज आई गॉट नो अपोजिशन फ्रॉम आइदर मीडिया और कॉमन पीपल और एनीबडी हु सेड कि ये पैसा ज़्यादा है 100 रुपीज इज तो फिर हालांकि वी हैव डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ कंसेशन फॉर स्कूल चिल्ड्रेन ग्रुप एटसेट्रा लेकिन एक तो मेरा 100 रुपया है सो दैट गिव्स मी अराउंड 20% ऑफ माई बजट वो आ जाता है फिर मर्केंडाइजिंग इज वन एरिया विच वी हैव नॉट एक्सप्लोर्ड एट all these big European museums are making huge money by merchandising. So that is one area I am focusing on a bigger scale. मैं थोड़ा उसको अच्छे लेवल से इंटरनेशनल प्रॉब्लम क्या है यू डोंट हैव ए गुड पर्सन टू पैकेज इट यू डोंट हैव गुड कुरियर्स हु कैन डिलीवर ऑन टाइम वो अमेरिका तो नहीं होगा 24 आवर्स डिलीवरी हाउ कैन यू गारंटी बट इफ आई एम इंटरिंग दैट एरेना आई एम ट्राइंग फॉर ऑल दोज थिंग्स तो मेरा है कि अल्टीमेटली माई आइडिया इज इन 2-3-4 years we will make it 50% because I am aware that some other government don't 10 years down the line may not get budgets like it is happening with many of these government museums. So you have to be prepared. Number two kya hai? Then you start getting support. Unfortunately, Mumbai has lot of corporate and big support. Sabyasachi, if he wants to host a dinner, he has got 5 people saying that I will host the dinner. Bihar does not have. हम लोगों को so I have to find some other ways how to take it to 50%. Or and then you have to keep on inventing. And I have kept my core team very small team. I have just 16 people as my core team, and all other is outsourced. So I have like services. The most difficult and most costly thing is maintenance. That in fact 50% of my expenditure is just maintenance. Another 20% is security. So and you can small you can create activities and you can make little money. You cannot make big money. So if it is become 50%, I am happy. But still, my role is museum's role is education. We have used materials like we have used cotton steel as a cladding material. So people said, why it looks like a rusted iron, and I said people will learn to use this as a that material to in their buildings. Then my furnitures are minimalist furniture. So people are learning what type of furniture. They are buying all those big ones and very costly ones. How a small furniture, very minimalist furniture can do same function. So we have taken that role also. That museum is trying to community give that education. So directly I may not be able to make that money, but indirectly we are.
म्यूजियम की बातें हो रही थी बहुत अच्छी बात है और गर्व की बात है कि इस तरह का प्रोजेक्ट बिहार में आया मेरा सवाल है बिहार के लिंग्विस्टिक ट्रेडिशंस पे बिहार के बाहर तो छोड़िए बिहार के अंदर भी मैं कई जगह पे मुझे भी मौका मिलता है बोलने का और लोग पूछते हैं कि आपका मदर टंग क्या है तो क्या बिहार के लिंग्विस्टिक ट्रेडिशंस पे अंगिका बज्जिका भोजपुरी मैथिली मगही या मगधी प्राकृत जो मैं मानता हूँ कि वो जेनेसिस है अभी जो भी भाषाएं बोली जाती है सबकी या पाली कैथी स्क्रिप्ट है जो मैंने दादी से बचपन में सीखा था अब ख़त्म हो गया तो इस बारे में म्यूजियम में कुछ करने का इरादा है या अभी कुछ है उसमें या फ्यूचर में हम लोगों को एडुकेट करें कि बिहारी बाहर जाके ये ना बोले कि मेरी मातृभाषा हिंदी है
वेरी गुड in fact we have 2 galleries one is dedicated to folk art तो हमारा जो भी folk tradition visual है उसका है and for that language and other things we have a Bihar diaspora gallery. So what we are planning to do and what we have done and trying to enrich it कि जितना even we are going to the history जब बिहार का लोग माइग्रेट करके फिजी सुरीनाम फ्रेंच गुआना मॉरिशस जब गया how language songs rituals were preserved तो उसका वीडियो कलेक्ट किया, उसका सॉन्ग्स क्रिएट वो फिर लिटरेचर वहाँ का अभी हम लोग जमा किए हैं बहुत सारा. सो दैट इज बिकमिंग, वी वांट टू बिकम ए रेफरेंस सेंटर. दैट इज आवर ड्रीम. I don't know how long it is going to take, but it's a very sizable community. You know, it's a huge diaspora which can be tapped, who are still maintaining those things. In fact, I went to Mauritius. Some of the words they speak in Bhojpuri, वो बिहार के लैंग्वेज से खत्म हो गया. वो different language की mix में, but they have those pure ones, which gives you exact expression if you hear that word. ये एरिया हम लोग के रिसर्च और काम का है. ये हम लोग वी हैव आइडेंटिफाइड बट स्टिल वी हैव ए लॉन्ग वे टू गो. वो सब चीज के बारे में लाने का हम लोग का आइडिया है, लेकिन अभी बहुत हुआ नहीं है.
I was recently in the Bihar Museum, and only 2 weeks ago. It will surprise you that so many people visiting to the museum, all young, all the age groups. And आपने जो बोला कि भाषा के बारे में, तो मुझे अंजनी जी ने खुद दिखाया 3 ऐसी जगह है पूरे म्यूजियम में जो आप तो बहुत कुछ देख सकते हैं, लेकिन कुछ सीखने का भी है. जैसे आप अपना नाम खुद डालेंगे तो पाली के भाषा में आपका नाम लिखा हुआ आएगा. तो ऐसी ऐसी चीज इन्होंने म्यूजियम में लगाई है. उर्दू में आएगा, तो कैसे उच्चारण किया जाएगा आपका खुद का नाम इस भाषा में. तो ये मुझे देखकर आश्चर्य हुआ और अच्छा भी लगा. और इतनी सारी भीड़ लगी हुई थी लोगों के वहाँ पे अपने नाम डालने के लिए, और दूसरे भाषा में कैसे उनका नाम लिखा जाएगा. तो इंटरेक्शन जो था ऑडियंस के साथ, म्यूजियम का डायलॉग, ये बड़ा पॉजिटिव एंड वेरी वेरी people were so crowded and they were very happy to see their name.
I just have a concluding remark. So we are part of the architect team with Maki, and I want to say it has been a brilliant experience to make the museum. And the best compliment I read on Instagram was like, if you don't go to Taj Mahal, it's fine, but you have to visit the Bihar Museum. And that was something very rewarding. And I really urge that everybody visits the museum. And thank you, Anjani ji, for making programs like the Biennale, which will get everybody to see the museum. Thank you.
तो ये जो भाषा का जो है ना आपका, बहुत बहुत ही अहम की बात की आपने. ये गाने जो है ना फिल्मों के, पॉपुलर सिनेमा के गाने, वो भाषा को कहाँ ना कहाँ रखते हैं जीवंत. हमारे सिनेमा के म्यूजियम में जैसे आपने पाली भाषा और उर्दू, हमने प्लेबैक का एक, जब साउंड आया हिंदी सिनेमा में, भारतीय सिनेमा में 1935 के दौरान, तो प्लेबैक इंडिया ने इंट्रोड्यूस किया था, प्लेबैक. तो वहाँ एक खंड है ये म्यूजियम में, नटराज ने हमने साथ में किया था. नटराज दासगुप्ता है डन वंडरफुल वर्क इन दिस फिल्म म्यूजियम. तो वहाँ एनी विजिटर कैन कम एंड सिंग अ सॉन्ग. तो वो सॉन्ग रिकॉर्ड होता है और देन शी और ही कैन लिसन बैक टू दैट सॉन्ग. तो उसमें कई सारे विकल्प हैं. यू कैन चूज योर सॉन्ग. भोजपुरी गाना आप चूज कर सकते हैं, तमिल गाना चूज करते हैं, विविध भाषाओं के गाने हैं. तो आप गाओ, रिकॉर्ड करो और वापस सुनो. तो ये बहुत ही पॉपुलर हुआ है एक अपना ही गाना सुनने का, प्लेबैक. तो ये इंटरैक्टिव जो है, मेरे ख्याल से सिनेमा इज ग्रेट रिपोजिटरी, पर्टिकुलरली पॉपुलर सॉन्ग्स.
लैंग्वेज को बचाया इंडिया.
हाँ, actually. Okay, thank you so much everyone for joining us.